Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another segment of the Scry for Help 1-year birthday celebration. We are very pleased to have Jessica Kent here, a super nerd extraordinaire and death expert who studied mortuary science, correct?
Sort of. I worked as a funeral director's assistant for about 2 years and as an autopsy technician for 3. So I studied biology, but I'm considering studying mortuary sciences.
So extrapolated into the mortuary sciences, more like it. Took
hmm
biology and took it to whole new heights.
Definitely. Got a little too biological, I guess.
Well, definitely there's biology, pathology, and all kinds of things in there. So thank you for being with us tonight. And tonight, as you know, we're celebrating the Scry for Help novella of Grieve birthday, a supernatural story about, of course, grieving and death itself and looking to the supernatural. And so wanted to invite you to speak on some experiences you've had, especially at working in mortuaries and interacting with actual dead bodies and people in so I guess the first question, because one of the major themes of this book is not just death itself, but approaching death itself. And so when you approach a subject and see it face to face, see them face to face, how do you approach that body emotionally?
That's an awesome question. For me personally, it was always really different. I think every situation has a different impact on you. For me, it was always learning the person's story prior to meeting them. And I I had a few coworkers, especially when I worked in the morgue, who thought I was a little bit odd because I would I would talk to the bodies. That kind of helped put me at ease of like, okay, I don't always know what I'm about to see here, but I'm Jessica, and I'm going to be working with you today. And that level of giving some respect, I would say, um, because I am not a religious person, but I am spiritual, and I do think that at times there are facets of our energy that remain with our body until we are really ready to move on to whatever else is next. So on the off chance that somebody was still there, I wanted them to know, like, I'm not hurting you. Here's what I'm going to be doing, and like, let's just have a look and let's see who you are. And um, a lot of times the situations that I got, or the patients that I got or met, um, it was traumatic deaths. So what sucked about that too is like knowing the person's story when they are right in front of you, and then perhaps reading a news story later about what happened to that person as well. So it's an unfortunate way to tie that person's story together, but it always helped me know a little bit more. But it is sad, and you do have to kind of put yourself in this mindset of like, okay, part of this is, yes, it is a job, but also like I want to respect this person as they lie and make sure that I'm really taking the time also for myself to deal with any sort of potential traumas that their situation brings up for me. So um, I feel like there's a lot in that answer, but it's just like you have to give yourself and that person space to be in each other's lives or in each other's presence as you receive them.
Wow, that is an incredible answer. There is a lot in that, but that's very interesting. Definitely bringing up the personability of someone who has passed and respectability, because they were a human being and still are in many respects. Just because they have passed on, like you said, there is something still lingering there, whatever that may be, whether it's both the physical organs that you are handling and have to examine scientifically, but also the organs and beating hearts that you don't see, and not correlating them to that news story that you mentioned, that doesn't become their life. That becomes the tabloid of their life that everyone reacts to and sensationalizes, but it's not actually indicative of that person. That is, and so when you bringing together your own space and this individual space, when you interact with this person, you learn their story, and then you have to present them to the people who actually did know their story. How would you approach how do you approach people who are grieving, knowing that you have also started a process of grieving, both for them and also for yourself?
It's very delicate. And I think that the most important thing to remember, kind of with anything, is we're all human. So we all process different information and situations very differently. Um, I am a very socially awkward person, but I find that when it comes to moments of grief and sadness, like somehow that I'm able to navigate pretty easily, um, perhaps because
You're,
of my own.
you're an empath, yeah, very much.
Yeah, so like I feel that connection, and I think that the best lesson I was ever taught by one of the funeral directors that I worked with was, yes, you do have to make sure that you are there as a support, but it's okay if you cry. You're a human being. Like, this is a hard situation. It doesn't matter if the person died natural causes in their sleep from old age, or if it was somebody who died more traumatically and younger. That person still meant so much to those people that you're about to work with, or who you're about to present them again to. And um, it was always a very nerve-wracking when it was just like, okay, well, we've gone through everything that you wanted to be done, and if it was like open casket or something, like, here is your loved one, who I know looks absolutely nothing like they did when they were alive, but hopefully this is, I mean, these are not things I would actually say to people, but in my mind sometimes I just kind of wanted to be like, isn't this weird? Why are we doing this? I'm
Yeah,
so
it's
sorry.
always that joke, you open the coffin and 20 clowns pop out, but
Yeah.
it's morbidity and humor trying to combat what's actually being presented to you.
Exactly. And I think that, like, knowing when to have those moments of levity as a support to somebody, like, grieving is not all sadness. Grieving is a lot of anger, a lot of questioning, a lot of doubt and skepticism, a lot of weird, out of nowhere jokes and phrases and things. And it's not all just somber sadness. And I think that's the biggest thing, where people are just like, I should be sad all the time. This is how I must grieve. And there is no roadmap to that. So those moments of levity, I think, are for me, especially as someone who, I just want everybody to be okay. But I also know, like, being okay is very loaded and depends on your own terms. But those moments of levity, I think, are what help to remind people, like, this is a very sad and difficult time. You're not going to feel like this forever. You are going to grieve forever, but that grief is going to change. And it's okay to still be who you are as a person, as like a woman or a man, or as anyone, just to make sure that you remember, as a human, you're still you. This is just a process that you are moving through.
Wow. Yes, and you like you as you say, there's no roadmap, and so when people tell you this is how you should grieve, like, why aren't you feeling X, Y, Z? Why are you presenting yourself this way? You are not respecting this person's legacy by acting like that, like a random joke that may have come to you from some dredged up memory of a time when that person may have actually made that joke to them. And there is no right way to grieve, and it's almost offensive to be told how to grieve. Like, you should be respectful, absolutely, but respect can take on the form of many emotions.
Definitely. And I think there's also that flip side of, people being like, well, why aren't you over this yet? Like, why haven't you completed the grieving process? Which is not up to anybody except for you. And you see it all the time when people either like adopt pets or like too soon for people, or in relationships too soon for other people. And it's like, this isn't, it's not for you to say why haven't you grieved enough, or why have you grieved so, why have you grieved so much. um and I think that experience is so personal and so different. It's why we mourn celebrities in different ways. When people are like, you've never met this person. Yeah, but like, they changed my life in some way. I mean, not to get like all about me, but the day Prince died, I was just like, no one can talk to me for like a month or so. I just can't. And I'm like, I like Prince. I'm not a huge Prince fan, but I like a lot of his songs. But the way that him as a person, as an artist, the way that he affected the way that I try to live my life and be my authentic self was just like, this person who I'd never met in my entire life, but meant so much in the grand scheme of things. I can't, as opposed to like, well, like, oh, it's really sad, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but like, it's just the way
That connection you feel, like going, that spiritual connection, and be
exactly.
someone who was able to reach out to millions upon millions of people through a very special talent of their own.
Hmm.
For me, when Wes Craven passed away, that was being a major horror fan, but also when reacting to a filmmaker who, yes, made horror films, but did it in ways that was able to reach out to his audience in a scary but caring way. He probed our dreams. He probed our culture. He with Scream. He elevated the horror culture into an art form while still knowing the machinations of the genre well enough to provide exactly what you wanted, yet doing it in ways that were very smart and intelligent, never talking down to you, and always inviting you into the experience. So like for you and Prince, or some kind of influence like that goes away, you feel it more, not just in here, but like an aura has moved away.
Exactly.
And it's, or at least an aura that won't be fed into.
Yeah, it's like that knowledge that this beautiful gift that the world has gotten, especially, I think your description of Wes Craven is so spot on, where that invitation to that world, it hasn't been revoked, but it's just stopped.
There will be no new
Yeah,
invitations into the world, but go we will always be able to mourn it in a way by celebrating, because mourning, so that brings into the next thing. So mourning, celebration, but also especially in the context of this story, mourning as celebration, but also mourning as destruction. So do you feel that there obviously is a difference, but so we talked about that there's no right way to grieve, but is there a wrong way?
I think, yes. This might be controversial, but I think the wrong way to grieve is any way that would cause you yourself harm. And it is, I think, for a lot of people, and I've been in situations like this myself, where there is comfort in that destruction, specifically self destruction, but you have to also be mindful of the fact that that's where that self care and self preservation comes in. There's only so far you can take certain things until you yourself get to that point of like, there's no real good return here. Um, so in my mind, I feel that the wrong way to grieve is anything that could cause harm to yourself, other people, obviously, as well. Um, and that's where that allowance to really, it's important to feel your feelings, but those feelings need to be given that space and respect also. that like, yeah, I am so mad. I want to do something really bad. I want to break something. I want to set all everything on fire. Like, let's just burn it all down. How can you do that in a safe and respectful way? Because the sadness you're feeling, especially for the loss of a person that means so much to you, you know, to respect them as well in that mourning. They wouldn't want you to be destructive. So those negative effects of grief, especially being such a strong feeling and something that people can and do feel for so long, um, can certainly take that toll. But and it's hard to keep that in check, and that's where I think a lot of support is really helpful. And this is where people are like, I don't really know how to support, and I don't want to be like, hey, are you okay, when I know someone's not okay. um, so teaching other people kind of this like bystander intervention for like, hey, here's some cool stuff that you can do, instead of asking if someone's okay, just be like, I brought a pizza, let's hang out, or hey, I sent you this book, or just like something of a distraction, to make people remember how they can feel better and how grief will change. I think a lot of times when somebody does pass away, we we're very quick to say like, I'm so sorry for your loss. If you need anything, let me know. No one's going to be like, actually, I can't stop drinking. I need help. You need to kind of be there and be like, hey, I'm just going to keep bothering you. And that's what's going to make sure that you're not doing things that are destructive. Um, so,
Passive help versus like active help is what you're saying. So
oh yeah,
it's like the whole thoughts and prayers phenomenon. Thoughts and prayers don't exist. Action does.
right.
And it's true for people grieving, and perhaps right and wrong maybe is one way to look at it, but then also kind of like you said, it is I do agree that there are definitely wrong paths to go down, and but also maybe it seemed right at the time, because like you said, you need to allow yourself to feel. I definitely think that when you are feeling that darkness, that you should be allowed to flirt with it and understand it and see it, but then find hopefully find the solution that can help curb that darkness. Like you said, find the people who bother you for support, and us as humans need to be better about that with each other. It's because that person can't necessarily be hinging on a bet that someone's going to bother them, especially a lot of people who aren't allowed those luxuries that a lot of us do have. But we as people should be able to recognize grieving better, so that when we see someone who maybe is in danger of harming themselves or something like that, to truly try and find a solution, whether it be, like you said, being a designated driver. Like if they really need to just go on a bender for a night, let them,
Hmm.
and
Oh
then
yeah.
protect them. Like, but if they need to get it out of their system and then help ease them out of it, do it. Unless of course it's something worse than that. But um, destigmatize the therapy. Like, let people allow people space to talk, and
Hmm.
like you said, to have that conversation, be that shoulder, but also don't be afraid to go to a perfect stranger and say, I need help. And also, hopefully, we can all advocate for allowing better spaces that can open up mental health for people who do need that space, because it's expensive, it's prohibitive. You have to have this, you have to have that, you have to have insurance. There need to be more community resources for that.
100%. And I think, um, to go back a little bit too, a lot of us are very quick. I know I have recently gone through some trauma and opened up a little bit about it, and people were like, I noticed that you were a little off. And as much as I appreciate that sentiment, if someone had, when they noticed I was a little off, and like, Jessica, what are you doing? Um, I may have just been like, I'm fine, whatever, but push it a little bit. If you know something's wrong, trust your gut. it's not always comfortable also to go up to someone and be like, hey, what's up with you right now? Especially when you know that they're going through something pretty big. And at the same time, sometimes people need that. So the way that I've come to this when helping other friends through grieving processes is, you might hate me for this, but we need to do something about this. We need to make a change. Let's work together on this. You don't want to work with me? That's fine. Who would you rather work with? What would you rather do? Like, what can I do to give you that avenue? And that's it's kind of, it's kind of like advocating for like a safer space in general for any other thing. Like, you want to make sure that people are comfortable if they want to go through whatever destructive path that they can. How can I support that then? Like, how can I make it so that when you're ready to stop or ready to move on, or when you need that help, and how can I do all of this in a safe way with you so that you can get what you need to out and really feel whatever you need to feel to move on to the next phase of the grieving process. Be it, you know, designated driver, which I think that's an awesome, yeah, like sometimes you just need to
let it out, or be that person who actually gives a phone number saying, please text me, and
yeah,
then actually text back when they do need to chat, whether it's a month or an hour from the time that you gave it, or like you said, say what's up, I don't want to talk about it. Okay, but when you are ready to talk about it, I'll still ask the same question. It's drawing lines in the sand with each other, like you're saying, like, you know, creating boundaries for one another, making sure that everyone's protected in it, but also the fact that you're willing to face the discomfort and the awkwardness almost of getting to know someone on a deeper level than you ever imagined. But imagine how beautiful our world would be if humans could connect on that just that once. Like, it doesn't have to be with everybody because not everyone knows each other, but especially in friendships, relationships, families, and everything like that, just having the guts and conviction to be able just to have one difficult conversation where you actually help somebody.
exactly. And it, you know, sometimes it starts with something as simple as, hey, I heard this song and I thought about you. Here's the song. Or I was just thinking about you. Just wanted to say hi, you know, and you've already opened up this avenue that didn't exist before. And if people are like, you know, if someone responds, I really appreciate that. I've been having a really hard time. I'm here if you need to talk or when you're ready. And then a week later, like, hey, I do this all the time to people. I haven't talked to people in a really long time. I'm like, here's a really cute picture of my dog you probably need to see.
Everyone always needs that. And you never know what difference you're going to make in a person's day, whether it is grieving or difficulty. And it's not always going to lead down a, you know, long, like, therapeutic talk, but it's still therapeutic.
Yeah. And I think also, like, if you are that person reaching out, making sure that you mentally have the bandwidth for that, because you don't always know what you're walking into. So it's important to just kind of check yourself and make sure that you're prepared and that you're setting the boundaries for what you're prepared for also.
Yes, and it's very good to mature oneself, like to understand what your personal limits are, because some people do have the limits they truly can't approach that, and that's fine too. We
Mm-hmm.
all, like you said, I like the word bandwidth. Like, we all have personal bandwidths for what we can handle
Yeah.
and what we can channel for people. So leaping off of that, you mentioned you're a spiritual person as well, and so since we are talking about a ghost story here and talking about exactly, and so as you know, this story is about a man who is mourning the loss of his lover, and he wants him back so bad that he decides to go down the route where he decides to summon him, through the method of scrying. Now, do you feel that there are ever appropriate times in anyone's grieving or mourning process, or not even that, or periods of rationality slash or irrationality that anyone should ever do something like that?
You know, as an avid horror fan myself and a very big Tales from the Crypt fan, I have learned early on that is a terrible idea. It's not, it will never go as you've planned or hoped. It is enticing, but I could literally send you a list of television shows and movies and stories explaining why that is such a terrible idea.
So even so, if, for example, so some of the people that you have had the privilege to meet in the mortuary, because there are a lot of people that you're privileged to meet, and then there's probably some people that you probably didn't want to meet, and not just because of what you saw, but because of what vibe you catch off of them, the energy. Um, has there ever been a moment where you maybe got close to meeting somebody like that either could have gone an interesting way or maybe could have gone the wrong way?
Honestly, like there are a lot of people that I remember. There's one person who has always stuck with me, and I wish I could have met him, um, because just I met his friends who were amazing. I met his family who didn't respect who he was. And I wish that I could have known him to know, you know, how we could properly make him feel supported in his goodbye. Um, yeah, I will never forget that guy. It's so like, I was actually thinking about him the other day. Because his was a fall funeral, and as things got chillier, it just reminded me, it was like this like beautiful crisp day. This was like over a decade ago too. Like it's ridiculous how these things just stand out to you. But yeah, I would have loved to know him, and I often wonder if our paths ever crossed because I feel like we went to like some of the same bars and stuff. But um I would have loved to know him. There were quite a few people who certainly made impacts on me. Him being, I would say, probably number one. Um, I'm trying to think of people that I definitely. Oh, there was one person. There are two people I could think of who I probably would not have wanted to meet because they seem like very tough people. Um, I. It's hard because I kind of, you know, where people's stories catch up with me or caught up with me at the time, it was never the way that you wanted to know that person. um One guy actually would have been really cool to know his stories, but the only way we would have met at like a biker bar, and that was not really my scene. He was a super tough guy, and I say like tough guy because he was like a motorcycle-y, heavily tattooed, but not in a scary way. But I mean, like I'm tattooed, but like not in a like, oh God, I wouldn't want to meet this guy in a dark alley kind of way, you know? So I bet he had some good stories. But yeah, like,
You just
yeah.
that maybe, especially when you do start connecting with spirits of people and everything like that, like I love the first example is beautiful of like someone that you wish you could have met. Like it's almost transposed memory that happens to you, and from either from this person or you to them, of what could have been or what should have been or what actually was. But it's what's interesting, and being a Tales from the Crypt fan too, would definitely say that even with those memories, when you bring something like, if you choose to bring something like that back and enter it into a physical world where it's actually not bound by any physical law, that can still manipulate even those good intentions of not just yourself, but also of that spirit to be manipulated into something completely malevolent or unexpected behavior. Not necessarily malevolence, but something uncontrollable because it's now it's now loose in a world that it no longer belongs to. And also, you don't, on the other side of things, you don't know what rules they're bound by, and they can be much more powerful than they can be here, which is a very spooky concept.
That's one of the things I think about a lot too, especially in those types of scenarios on shows or in literature. Is like there's always that moment of like, oh my God, I'm back. But now I'm not me, I'm something else. And what am I? And then like there's just this growth that has to happen mentally so quickly of understanding your place in the world and thinking about, like you said, like the things that bind you elsewhere, and that power it's not really something to be playing with, because you don't know it's that like you have to kind of sell your soul for this person to come back who is so broken of who they were that you don't know who you are bringing back. So as comforting as the idea of like I would do anything to have my old cat Jordy back. He was the best.
Yes, he.
Like such a sweet boy, but it would not be him. And I would probably be one of those people who's like, no, it's him. He's fine. He's totally fine. No, he's not doing anything weird. He didn't eat somebody. It's totally fine. That's what he did before.
It's
That's
not.
normal.
It seems cliche, but it's like Stephen King said, "Dead is better." Like it's just,
Yep.
or Judd Crandall. Sorry, Stephen King, because we have to speak as if it's Fred Gwynn, because there's no one else who could nail that line. But it is the church's cat syndrome.
Yep.
You know, it's not. It's your cat. It's like it says, it's your cat now, Lewis, but it's not your cat.
Nope.
It's your cat, again, bound by this contract that you have created by some other force out there. It's bound to you because you're now enslaving it back into this physical world, which is frightening, because those are powers you know nothing about. And being spiritual myself, like I do believe there's a lot of powers you shouldn't mess with, and grieving, of course, can activate a lot of that energy out of anger, sadness, happiness, love, fear, all desire. Like it all melds into wanting something back. But you know, you don't want. I truly believe you do not want to meet some things that come out, even in the best shapes.
Oh yeah. It's that old, I feel like I've been saying this so much lately. Impact is greater than intent. Your intentions can be so pure and so good, but what you're about to do will just never be what you wanted it to be, or never be what you yourself meant for it to be as soon as you put it back into the world.
Yep. And that's great advice, not just for summoning spirits, but also for grieving in general and behavior. Like, just remember, like, your actions may be justified, but also remember what the outcome may be, and like you said, future impact from the intention. And if the impact is something that maybe is more negative, be ready. And sometimes you're not ready, because that's part of the point of grieving. Like you said, it's no roadmap, and sometimes we just tumble down it until we make mistake after mistake, and then finally realize, whoa, I've been tumbling down this hill for miles. I either need someone to catch me, or now I caught myself. Now it's time to go back up that hill and pick up the pieces. And it can be a very hard fall.
Definitely.
And so we're in agreement then. Just don't maybe not mess with the supernatural. At least not too much. It's a little fun. Like I tell everybody this. I've always wanted to try a Ouija board. I've never done it, and I need the right group. You can't do it with. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Thank you for volunteering as tribute. Yeah, because and also I do feel that Ouija boards, you do need not a designated driver for, but like a designated I will be taken for you, like someone who is not really afraid to be like, guys, whatever happens, I love you all, but that demon can yank me into the board. You guys will be fine, but I will be. What would you call that? Your designated possessee? Is
Yep.
that what?
Or
Yeah.
like
You're designated Reagan, like
volunteer demon body.
the VBD. There we go.
CBD.
Yes, yeah, I like that. I will be your VBD during this Ouija session. But I do, because I do find certain ideas of summoning as connection with spirits very interesting, and it can tell you a lot about people, and learning stories, as you said, and connecting. But maybe there are safer ways of doing that. So probably read up on it and do your homework before amateur hour.
Yeah, and if nothing else, make sure you know where the closest local witch lives, because then that's usually the person who's going to save your ass.
Pretty much. And guys, there's a lot of them out there. So please, they're not in the yellow pages, but just ask around. They're here. They're cool. They're chill. You know, they're really cool to have a nice cup of hazel tea with. So, um, and so I wanted to go back to a point. You brought up a really good point about like grieving and being allowed space. I really liked that, the way you phrased that, and allowing allowing people the the privilege of grief and public grieving and access to grieving. And part of, as you know, this is a queer horror novel, and part of the mission of putting it out into the world is to give queer voices and audiences a look into their own grief, and presented in a supernatural, entertaining way. But the intent, of course, is to provide, this exists, guys. It's real, it's normal, it happens every day. And do you feel that there are enough spaces for that kind, for queer communities to grieve, communities of color? You know, current climate is, of course, very challenging, but in your time working for as a funeral director, or in your thoughts now, do you feel like we're in a place where people have that access?
I don't. I think it's becoming more possible. I think that for the longest time, queer communities, people of color, have not been allowed to grieve. They've been tasked with taking traumas and just moving on, or taking traumas and becoming activists overnight. And being able to actually process hasn't been part of the equation. So one good thing, especially within the death positive movement, is you do have a younger crop of people, which includes more people of color, more queer identifying people, who will understand the importance of creating these spaces. So I feel like there is a good amount of hope, but it's so difficult because even in America, we give so much weight to birth and life, but death, we are just kind of like, don't look at it, don't worry about this, don't think about it, we're not going to talk about it. And it's the way that death impacts the straight community is very different from how it impacts queer community, because there's more trauma based death in that way. So there's this disassociation of how to really feel and what to feel, and how to process. The hope, of course, is that will always be this way, and that things will truly continue to get better. But my personal hope is that there is more weight given to the way that different communities grieve, because of how vastly different everybody processes things. And the day that, or when the time comes, it feels so shitty saying this, when the time comes that people can just die natural deaths and it's not based in trauma, still having that space to be like it's going to be such a shock. I feel like, which is fucked up, like
where we don't have to live in fear, because a lot of it sounds like it's very interesting, the death positive movement, like the fact that like being afforded a natural death versus living in fear. Queer communities, communities of color, especially right now with like um, the facing, in particular, the trans community and like trans Black women and everything, facing the fact that they don't know if they're going to live or die on the street, just walking down the street. I mean, let me, and death is very much aggravated by assaults. And then, of course, queer communities have been ravaged by illnesses throughout the years. The comorbidities in queer and communities of color are, of course, up because access to healthcare. And so it's true, like there is more trauma induced, and that makes it harder for people to grieve because it's almost like a fog.
Yeah.
And it feel and and part of the process in writing this was sort of lifting through that fog, because um even as a gay man myself and everything, like processing death is difficult, because especially when you learn about your community and where you come from, and whose footsteps are you following, and some of the greatest tales came out of horror, and not just like the genre horror, but true real life horror. And it's almost like we as a community are still, we are grieving privately for ghosts of one of the greatest phrases I learned from it was from the 90s, like early queer theory, looking at the ghosts of our past and how they haunt history into the, like, from then into the present. And it was looking at the time of the HIV AIDS crisis, and the fact that we carry that burden of countless people gone. And of course, right now we understand this very well, but people forget that a lot of people are either still living with it or still grieving it, but you will never ever hear about it. And so, like you said, a younger generation hopefully can help lift that, so that people can not necessarily get over it, but be allowed to vocalize the fact that I am in mourning, and I am actually presenting a spiritual past to you, because they are following us where we go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think there's so much rage in that grief that kind of goes back to that the wrong way to process it. Like, you don't have a choice though, and that's not fair, which there's so much that isn't. But so that's my hope, is that, and not to like put it on the younger communities, but like or the younger death positive community, but those are, we're the ones who are making this move forward in a way that is a more healthy way to process grief for everybody. So my hope is that as things progress, and as more and more people especially get into the death positive movement and understand really what that entails, these spaces and these communities of grief become a lot more prevalent, supportive, and it's less people living with rage and fear in their grief, and more people being able to properly grieve and feel, like, not just feel pain, but feel understanding in a way that is healthy and makes sense. And kind of going back to what you said with regards, especially to the trans community, the Black trans community, um, so many people are living in fear or reprocessing grief every single time a death occurs. That's not, this
it,
is not, no, this is not right. So
it's not right. It's just reset, reset, reset.
yep.
And nothing's being done about it. And especially when they're going through their own personal time figuring out literally who they are, and or they figured out who they are, and it's just living as your natural self. That's all it is. And yet, of course, so many people think otherwise, but it's almost like it's identity that, unfortunately, it's not shaped by trauma per se. That'd be too extreme to say, but it's definitely one that you have to remember can not like it can trying to phrase it properly. Like, it's one that is it's so hard because I'm thinking about all the people that continue dying like because of it, and I don't want to say it brings trauma because it's not correct, but it feels like it does because people keep bringing it to them.
Yeah,
And
it does
that
invoke
it's
those
the
feelings.
unfairness of it, and it's like it should be a free identity, and it's not, because people continue to bring their own hangups to it, and so it's identity that is hampered by other people's ills, and that's sad to me. And I want to live in a world, and I know everybody does, that people don't have to be afraid of that. And there are many that aren't, and then that's amazing. You should not live afraid. But it's sad to see that even in the face of that, people are afraid of that.
Exactly.
So, but yes, definitely thank you for those thoughts on what you've seen in those communities and everything. And I do hope that all of us can find a solution together and be able to allow ourselves either to publicly alleviate these problems, but also to privately do it, but knowing the comfort that people are not going to attack us for doing that and not continue bringing it to us.
Definitely. Exactly.
So, well, thank you very much for your thoughts. Very heavy conversation, everyone, but definitely worth having and very necessary. It's difficult talking about death, and this is not an easy time, not at all. But thank you for lending a very humanistic view, and to everyone out there, I sincerely endorse Jessica's recommendations. Like, don't be afraid to approach someone that you trust, and if you do need help, please reach out. And if you don't feel comfortable talking to a friend, there are resources out there. Ask around. They do exist, whether it's a community center, a shelter, a parent of somebody else that you're close to. Please do not hesitate. This is not a time for us to give up on each other, and we need to be each other's lifelines. And also, don't mess with ghosts. Be very careful, and please stay safe out there. Thank you very much for joining us, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure.